What's up, everyone? Turns out Steven is on a deadline and was rushing us to go live because he's got a meeting in an hour. So we have to get started so we can cover everything that Steven was interested in the stream. But welcome everyone to another episode of Learning Quick. Super excited to be back again with I say like a random guest in the best way, and it's the fact that I just get to reach out to people on Twitter that I see them doing cool stuff, and I'm like, hey, you want to come hang out? We've never met like most of our guests before. We got to talk for the first time 15 minutes before, and I just think it's so cool. This is my easy way to make friends. So welcome Amy Dutton to the channel. Do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am a senior UI and UX designer at Zeal and I also do front end. So I've been doing design and development for about 20 years, which is a little crazy.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm one of those geeks that got started when I was 16.
16. Okay.
Yep.
So I've talked about some of my background before, and I declared computer science going into college without having any idea what it was. Like I literally had to pick something, and I was like, that thing sounds maybe interesting, and that's how I ended up in it. So what was maybe that's a natural like getting started. What was your very first thing? What did you do when you were 16?
So I helped update my church's website. That was my summer job.
Nice.
My dad was into web stuff and worked in the IT department. And so actually, like when I was in second grade, I went to this conference and he was talking about the World Wide Web. And I was sitting in the back and I remember leaving the conference with him and asking about it. And that was in 92. So that tells you
Wow.
just being an early adopter.
Yeah. The
But
World Wide Web.
I know, right? I'm just like thinking of spiders in my head. But anyways, so just with his background that he had, it was he didn't push me in that direction by any means, but just something that we had in common and we could talk about. And then when I was 16, I got this job. So it was nice that I wasn't doing retail or fast food, but I was able to sit at my computer and update a website. And the first website, though, that I really built, when I was in school, they had a class trip to Washington, D.C., where the
Nice.
band was going to Disney World. And my parents said, you have to pick one or the other. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
Disney World.
Yeah.
And so while the rest of the class was in Washington, D.C., I spent all that time, that entire week, in the computer lab.
Hmm.
And they had Netscape Navigator tools. And I
Nice.
built this website that aggregated all the animated GIFs in the entire internet and put them, not really, but
Uh,
put
I
them on
was
my
I was like,
website.
wait, what?
No, I wasn't doing that kind of scripting, but I was just like going to, I think it was animationfactory.com and like
Okay.
downloading, talk about copyright issues, but downloaded like as
Yes.
many animated GIFs as I could and put them on a website. So it was enough to like give you a seizure, but I like to believe I was just ahead of my time, that I was making
Now you were
Giphy.com.
making Giphy, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
So
what I was like. I was like, wait, did you actually create Giphy when you started
that would have
explaining
been
that? I was like,
awesome.
what?
That
Still
would
a
have been
cool story
awesome.
though.
Yeah, yeah. So that was like my first like real intro on my own, and then I had that job experience, and then the following summer I actually got a job at a web firm. And that first summer I was just answering the phone, but there was a guy there that just really believed in me and wanted to encourage me, and so he handed me an HTML book and said, read this. And so I came back the next summer and was coding out websites along with everybody else. So that was pretty cool experience to be able to do that.
Okay, sweet. I got a little distracted. Someone said they couldn't hear
Yes.
you,
Oh,
but then other people said they
hear me.
can. I
Okay.
think you're good, and I see you on
Okay.
my audio levels. I think it's good, and a couple of people are saying they can hear you. So just confirming. I
Okay.
think I think we're
Cool.
good.
Awesome. Okay.
Um, but I love that background. I feel like so many people had that natural tinkering like that. I
Mm-hmm.
say that a lot of just like tinkering on stuff and experimenting with stuff and just kind of seeing what's out there. So I love that was kind of how you got your start, and then we're able to eventually take that somewhere else. And I just got thrown into like a CS 101 class and ended up really
Mm-hmm.
enjoying it. But the way I learned best and better and got better was the tinkering and just like trying to build
Mm-hmm.
stuff myself. So you kind of got started with that at a younger age, I think, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even when I'm trying to level up on something or learn a new technology, that's exactly how I learn. Like I'll watch the tutorial and then I'll have to find a project to be able to tinker and apply that
Yeah.
knowledge. And usually it doesn't really stick until I can apply it.
So this is I need like a soapbox animation, or like literally like a pedestal, and maybe I like get taller or something. But that's like one of my biggest soapbox topics is like
Mm,
reading from a book is not going to cut it. Watching a tutorial is great, but it doesn't cut it by itself. Like you have to be
mm-hmm.
able to build things yourself. And I am teaching my second round of a boot camp called Launch Code remotely. We'll talk more about your
Mm-hmm.
teaching experience in a second. But you go through and students they go through the book, they read, they do homework assignments, and the homework assignments either give them starter code or they tell them exactly what to do. And they can do that. But then when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to building a project on their own, they literally like, I don't know what to do. And it's because they've never been in that position before. So I'm very adamant that to learn, but also to understand means you have to do it yourself. And there's things that you just can't quite put together until you've actually been through it and like done it from
Mm-hmm.
scratch yourself.
Yep. Yep. Done those Google searches.
Yes. And been looking at like errors that lasted for hours.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
like that's just it's part of the
Yep.
process, unfortunately. But after you have that experience, you probably don't make the same mistake
Right.
that many more times or
Yep.
hopefully again.
Yep. Cements that concept in your brain.
That's right.
Yep.
I don't know if you heard or noticed, this is something I'm like kind of nerdily proud of. So the lights command, someone turned on the lights.
Yes.
And you actually probably you wouldn't hear it. Ah, gosh, I need to fix that for you to be able to hear it next time.
Oh, there you go.
But as they do that, it's actually playing a sound effect, a light switch sound effect that is going on in the stream. So it's not coming
Nice.
through to you in Zoom. Unfortunately, I apologize, but it is in the stream, which I thought was really cool. So I had a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of helping me test that the other day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So maybe we can get into. Well, actually, let's start with a little bit more of your background on the design side. And we had a conversation beforehand of you sent me a title that was design, UI, UX, and developer. I forget the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
Front end.
I
Yep.
felt really weird to say like, hey, can you shorten it so we fit it on the image, because I didn't want to. I feel like there's this big thing of like designers and developers and people thinking that designers aren't developers and vice versa, and it's just not true. And I didn't want to take away from the fact that you are like a fully fledged developer as well. Anyway, maybe a little bit more about like your specific, maybe getting into design and development professionally, like maybe what interests you or what your career looked like when you got started there professionally.
Yeah, sure. So on the design side, I've just always loved art and design in general. Just from when I was little, my mom talks about how she could hand me a paper and a pen and I would be
And
happy
just
for hours.
yeah.
Yeah. So when I worked at that company, I was interested in design like all along. And it was really great because, again, people just investing in me. And so, shows
Hmm.
the power of mentorship. But they would pull me in on their design critiques. And they even said, like, you design your own mock-up, we'll critique it. And if it's good enough, we'll show it to the client. We're still doing our own
Oh,
mock-ups. But
cool.
if it's not
Yeah.
good enough, that's okay. Like, you got experience
Hmm.
and you'll be better for it. So again, I just don't, there's so much in that experience as a teenager that I don't take for granted. I try not to, at least.
Absolutely.
So, and then I mentioned the guy handed me the HTML book. So those things kind of went hand in hand. As I was learning from my work experience with that company. And then when I went to college, I wanted to do 3D animation. So I was actually trying to find a
Oh,
school
cool.
based on 3D
Yeah.
animation. And I went to Middle Tennessee State University, and they were one of the few schools, at least a university, not an art school. They were one of the few schools that offered that as a program. So my major is actually radio, TV, broadcasting,
Oh,
which is
cool.
hilarious.
Nice. Yes. I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of us have kind of random-ish majors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it kind of shows that, I mean, when you're in what we do, a lot of it's your portfolio and your
Hmm.
experience. It's not really what degree you have on a sheet of paper. And it's cool. Like what I do now is all these things are kind of coming together with YouTube and now the streaming thing with you, but it's all like the video stuff from this like past 20 years ago or what, not quite 20 years, but
Coming
they're all
full
coming full
circle.
circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
So but anyways, I had that experience in college, and then when I got a job, I did a little bit of video work, but then had a connection on Music Row in Nashville. So I went and worked there for a year and built websites for artists and entertainers.
Love
So
it.
it's a little fun to name drop sometimes in conversation.
What about
Or
name dropping
just
on stream?
I will need. So I built Ice Cube's site, most of the country music roster. So Kelly Clarkson. We did do Janet Jackson's website, but we also had like random stuff like PBR, which is Professional Bull Riders, built
Okay.
their website too. I'm trying to think who else. We did Taylor Swift right when she was starting out.
Wow.
Yeah, so kind of crazy,
That's
but
great.
the
That's so
um,
cool.
yeah, it's fun to like be watching TV or something with my husband and then just kind of off the cuff be like, yeah, I built their
Yeah, right.
website.
Yeah. Just super casual. Yeah, it's no big deal or anything, but I
Yeah,
definitely did that. I think
yeah.
that is that's one of the cool things that a lot of people don't quite realize sometimes with development is like if you're going down this path of I want to be a developer or a designer, you don't really think of a lot of people don't really think about how to mold that into something that's particular to you. Like, and I haven't done this
Hmm.
specifically, but I love sports. I love basketball. So if I was able to do like programming, but also around sports, like that would be that much more fun, right? So to be able to
Hmm.
tie in like you got to do development and design, but then also you got to be around, I don't know how big of a country music person you are, but that's a
Hmm.
fun industry and other
Yeah,
artists. Like just to be able to have that name dropping experience means you are working around that sort of stuff. And it adds more, I think, to the job than just the job itself, if that makes sense. Because it's more
sure.
personal and more enjoyable for people.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It was fun. And it was also fun being on Music Row.
Hmm.
You'd still, this would always crack me up. Sometimes you'd see like somebody just walking down the street with a guitar. It's like, it's not really how it works. Like you can't just, walk into the studio and say, let me play you a
Yeah,
song.
right.
But yeah.
But they would try anyway, I bet. What
Yeah, for sure.
just out of curiosity, what years were you working in Music Row?
That was 2008, 2007, 2008.
Oh, okay. So I
Yeah.
got to Nashville in 2009 for college, which is
Oh,
where
fun.
my wife and I met, and we were not too far. So we were like 21st Ave, which was
Yep.
where the freshman campus was. So we were just a
Hmm.
couple of blocks away. So we almost maybe crossed
That's
paths on the street
hilarious.
one day.
We could have, because even after that, I was still working
Hmm.
downtown. So
Okay.
who
Yeah,
knows? We could have
definitely.
passed in a coffee
We
shop
could
or
have done this
something.
stream like 5 years. Wait, how long ago was that?
Oh,
Gosh,
goodness.
11 years ago in
I know. Isn't
2009.
that
That's wild.
crazy?
It is. Yeah.
Um,
You had Stephen was asking in the chat, do you have any art or design you'd like to share? And I put your selfteach.me. I put that link in the chat.
okay.
And then I
Awesome.
also added earlier in the chat so people can scroll up if you need it, your YouTube channel and Twitter, so people have some of those resources. Any other
Sweet.
specific place that they
Yeah.
might could find you?
Sure. So this is under my maiden name, but if you go to
Mm.
amyhaywood.com, their blog post stuff on there is really old, but you can click on the portfolio and see some of the illustration work I've done and some of the websites I've built. It's not exactly current, but at least give you an idea.
Oh, this already looks really cool.
And thanks.
I like it. I'm gonna throw the specifically the portfolio link in here, and then they can go to the
Sweet.
homepage from
Sweet.
the tabs if they want to. This is really cool. I I have this syndrome, and maybe this is something you could kind of talk about, which I'm trying to work on for myself.
Hmm.
But I've always just kind of shut down the idea of me being a creative and designy artistic person. Like it's never really been my thing. I've never gravitated towards it, and I look at content that other people create and websites that other people create, and the big gap that I see for myself is design. Like a lot of people are able to make stuff that just looks a lot better. It's a lot more appealing, a lot more fun, all these things.
Hmm.
And I kind of had this mentality for a while of like, that's just not me. But then I've also tried to be a little more proactive and look at it more as a science to say like, hey, this is something I can get better at if I practice and I
Hmm.
can learn more and more about it. And I've definitely gotten better. I still think I don't have the natural knack for it a lot, but I'm starting to talk about myself differently and not talk down on myself for it. So
Hmm.
I've done some decent things. But what is your perspective on like learning design and it being like a skill that you can practice and hone over the course of time?
Yeah. I definitely think that anybody could be a designer. I just feel like it's a muscle that you develop And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the cool thing about design versus art, because I do think that the two are different, design has rules around it. And a lot of times, especially like when you're building a website, there's even marketing and business applications that you have to take into consideration. It's not just using the right colors or the right
Mm-hmm.
fonts. And so, yeah, I think anybody could do it if they start to know the right rules. And then once you know the rules, you can break them.
Mm-hmm. That's I've heard that before, and I feel like it's a pretty impactful thing. Once you know the rules, you can break them because now you're able to make more educated decisions, I guess is what
That's
that
right.
comes down to, right? Yeah.
That's right.
That's really
Because I
cool.
mean, even when you're breaking the rules, there's still like almost a
There's
rule
still
that you're
rules with
following.
them you're
Yeah.
following a rule to break another rule.
Yes.
Like
So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a great example. So if you have a grid of items, they'll
Mhm.
call it, there's a popular trend right now. It's called breaking the grid, where you have things that overlap.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so
Kind
it's
of
breaking,
asymmetric.
right,
Yep.
right. It's breaking the grid. But even then, when I've broken the grid, the overlap stuff is still lining up with other elements on the page. So
Mhm.
it's not just this arbitrary overlap,
Sure.
it fits in with the overall picture.
Yeah.
So I'm breaking a rule and then I'm breaking the grid, but I am also following the rule of alignment
Love
and
it.
other things.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. So you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Another example of that, of maybe another rule that you could be following by breaking the grid, is you're breaking the grid to emphasize something else. Because a lot of
Yeah.
what in theory, I know is like you do all these things so that you emphasize where you want people's eyes and tracking to go, like what things are most
That's
important
right.
for them to see and interact with. So you can break the grid in a way that makes this thing somehow more visually appealing or a bigger call out for people to go to that specific thing.
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
See, I'm a
Uh,
designer.
Done. Done.
Done. Check.
Next.
Next conversation, please.
That's so funny. Yeah. No, but that's totally right on.
Very cool. Steven has another question here. Oh, first off, Taylor commented that your portfolio looks awesome and really
Oh,
appreciates the
thank you.
lazy loading of the images below the fold. So here's my design background, or yeah. Anyway, the fold was what would be like on a newspaper, and so before the actual literal crease in a newspaper, it was the stuff that you would see, and then below the fold is kind of secondary content to a certain extent, I
That's
guess.
right.
And lazy loading your portfolio images below the fold in web means they see like what they see when they load the page, and as they scroll, you don't load all the images immediately when the page loads. You load some of those images as they scroll to them, so they kind of they either pop in, but the main thing is for performance, right? So you're not loading all
That's
these
right.
images if they never get seen.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Cool, I'm
Yep.
there. I got it.
It's so funny talking about above the fold. I was even in a meeting yesterday where people were complaining that there was too much information below the fold. And it was like, come on, it's 2021. People know to
People know how to
scroll.
scroll, right?
Yes, yes.
And I guess that also, to your
But
point
that is
there,
a good,
go
sorry,
ahead.
that is a good use case though for above and below the fold is loading. That's when it is
Mhm.
important.
And that's a good example of, I think, the fact that like that terminology is somewhat outdated in some ways, but also just design, like anything else, evolves. Design changes, and now
Mm-hmm.
like you may have a little pushback to say like, hey, we're in a modern world where people have a mouse and they know how to scroll. It's not quite the same as what it would have implied 20 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The question from Steven in here was, where would you recommend someone to start with design, and then some of your favorite tools to use?
Yeah, sure. Both great questions. So, Refactoring UI is a fantastic book. Yes, I love it. Um, just super accessible. Does a great job of explaining the rules and
The
why you
rules.
would use them. Yeah. And they even have, I think they did, it's Adam Wathan and Scott, is it,
Not
no,
Scott Tolinsky.
Steve,
Steve Skager.
Steve. Yes.
It's
I
a
was like, I don't
weird.
know how to
It's a
pronounce his
different
last name.
not weird in a negative
Yes.
way. It's a different pronunciation that I'm not used to, and I think it's something like Skager.
Yeah. But he has some great stuff on his Twitter feed where he'll do hot tips,
Yeah.
where he'll kind of show two cards, which one looks better, and explain why. But any of the stuff that those guys produce has been fantastic. Another guy, what's his name? Is it MDS? He has, it's shit. I'm going to Shift Nudge.
Hmm.
I think
Okay.
that's it. Yeah, Shift Nudge. He has a course out on, yeah, it is MDS. Um, he has a course out on UI, UX stuff, and it is very good as well. I think he has like a rolling enrollment. Like, I don't
Okay.
think you can enroll
Enroll all the time.
anytime, right?
Okay.
But if you're more into like the video community type thing, that might be a way to go. But those are probably the two best resources. And then I would just say almost curating who you follow on
Yeah.
Instagram and Pinterest and things like that. So one of the biggest differences that I think between, say, student design and professional design is that when you're a student, you're looking at all the people around you and you're all just getting started, which is fine. But that's your influence, is
Yep.
that circle. And then once you become a professional, there's a huge jump there, because all of a sudden you're surrounded by professionals and you're seeing all these other high-end designs. So if you can curate what you're looking at, either on Dribble as another one, or Behance, any of those things, start to curate that, you'll notice that you'll almost gravitate towards what you put yourself around.
I'm going to give, I don't think, oh, it didn't play. Oh, I think it's because I moved some stuff. I have to fix my sound effects. I was going to give you a round of applause on the stream deck. And it's such a great point of the curation of who you follow. And I'm going to give a shout out to Zach, who's in the chat. He's one of my students now. And he has just completely immersed himself in being in these streams and being in the community and like talking to people and paying attention to people and having one-on-ones with people. And that's how it works, right? Like, you, to your point, if you're just around the students that are in your cohort or in your class or whatever, that it's great to have that support system and that community and those people to talk to. But you also want to have some people who have more experience, who have like other things to share that the people sitting next to you can't. So I love that idea. And I've been fairly intentional about people I follow. When something catches my eye, either it's good developer content or it's good design content, I certainly go and try to follow them as well. And just a selfish, from my standpoint, for you, shout out again. Your Twitter is in the chat. I just put it in there. So if people are looking for some people to learn design from, Self Teach Me is a good example on Twitter here, which is another question I don't think we got a chance to cover. Where does Self Teach Me come from? Where did that handle come from?
Yeah, so this is like such not an interesting story. I went to hover.com to register a URL. I don't even remember what it was, but just to see if it was available. And they have suggested URLs if it's not available. They'll make like these random suggestions. And Self Teach Me was one of their suggestions.
And you were
I was
like,
like,
done.
that's brilliant. Bye. So that's how that came about. Yep.
So I budgeted like 5 minutes for that conversation. So we're going to have, no, I'm just kidding.
It's like, I can talk a little bit longer. The thing I do like about it is I also think people underestimate the value of being self-taught. They don't think, maybe there's imposter syndrome there. I'm not sure. But the thing is, like, even if you go to school and get a degree in computer science or design or whatever, technology continues to evolve. So if you've been in the industry for any time, you have to have some form of self-teaching to be able to level up. You have to be a lifetime learner. Yeah.
Another round of applause. I broke my sound effects because I'm moving around my files and stuff, but another round of applause. You can imagine people in the chat. Yes, absolutely. I have a computer science degree. Double major with Spanish, by the way, talking about like random degrees, which actually helped me get my first job. That's a different story. But I have a computer science degree. I took classes. I took 4 years, obviously. Well, not obviously. You can do it at different times. But I took 4 years of computer science. And it wasn't a super practical set of classes in some ways. I never built a website before. I never used the terminal before. I never used Git before. Like a lot of these things that you would kind of expect, I had never done before. What we did do is build a lot of like data structures and algorithms from scratch. So there was a lot of like that theory. But anyway, so that, like, I have that degree, but I feel like I resonate more with people that are self-taught because 4.5 years ago, right before I moved back to Memphis, I did a huge pivot in my career where I finally took a course on web development. I'd never done any JavaScript before, ever. And I took this course and it completely changed my career. And I literally got like addicted. Like I did that course. I took another Udemy course. I started watching videos on YouTube, and it really sparked this thing inside of me where it's like, hey, I can learn to do whatever the hell I want to. Like, there's way too many resources out there that if you're passionate about it and if you are dedicated enough, people are kind of weary about passionate. I like to do things I'm passionate about. So I go back to passion.
Mhm.
But if you're dedicated enough and you want to do something enough, learn something, like you can, there's too many resources out there, free, paid, and cheap. There's like way too many
Mhm.
things not to do it if you're really interested. And another point that you mentioned is it's self-teaching is just kind of required to continue to be a developer. Like
Mhm.
things change way too fast for us to just kind of sit and think that we're
Mhm.
done learning. We're never done learning. And I suffer a lot less from imposter syndrome, and it's because of one reality that I've come to know. If I don't know something, it's not because I'm not smart. It's just because I don't have that experience. Like I can learn
Mhm.
that thing. I just haven't seen it yet. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they don't know it, they feel like they should have, and they get embarrassed and they feel like
Mhm.
they're not as smart. But it's typically not the case. It's really just about experience and having
Yeah.
experience in certain areas.
I would even add on to that that sometimes if you go read an article to try and learn something and it doesn't click, that doesn't say anything about you. And I think
Mm,
people take that personally or say, oh, I can't get this. Programming's not for me. The only thing that says is that that resource was not meant for you.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes it takes me reading the same concept from multiple sources. And finally, the fifth or the 10th time it
mm-hmm,
clicks because of the way that somebody said it. So
absolutely.
you can kind of take two things from that. Like one, you're not dumb, but two, if you're creating content, you could be that 10th resource that
hmm
it clicks for somebody because of the way that you said it.
Absolutely. I love that. I love the
Hmm.
reinforcement of that. And that's something I talk about a lot. Getting people to share. My video on YouTube yesterday was about bumping up your online presence and the benefits that can come with that. And just you sharing the things you're working on. You have no idea who can benefit from it, regardless of if someone's done that video or that topic a bunch. You
Hmm.
could be that 10th one. And I have certainly, anytime I search a topic, I find an article. I'm like, no, find an article, find a video. Like I do the same thing. And um, I explain this to my class a lot. When we cover concepts in class, I'm very transparent to tell them like I studied that concept in college. It didn't make sense for me for like 6 years, like literally six
Hmm.
years. And it wasn't until I was in this particular scenario working with a team on a project and blah, 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 that concept clicked. So if things don't click right away, that's okay too, even if you don't find the
Yeah.
resource that you need at that time.
Hmm. For sure.
There was Swarlow had a comment. I apologize. It's been a minute or two, Swarlow. But he says, talking also about designers who learn to code. I completely adore those who do that, but very often I notice it started limiting their creativity as they started thinking about implementation and limitations on the development side. Do you have any perspective on, I guess the question is kind of like a different mindset of design versus development. Development
Hmm.
maybe having more perceivably more rules and feeling kind of limited creatively.
Hmm. Yeah, I think for that person, I would, I'm going to guess, or just based on my own experience, that has to do with how they're learning in the beginning. Because for me, sometimes when I'm designing something, I almost look at it as a challenge and almost put on the design hat and take off the developer hat. Sometimes I'll have both simultaneously while I'm designing, but usually I'll kind of interchange them. But if I just design and then make it a challenge. How would I code this out, or how would I hand this off to somebody? And I just worry about the implementation later. I think that makes a big difference in how creative I can be.
And I think when you go to build something, like you, unless, so I guess it depends on kind of the work environment that you're in. If you're in a development position and a designer is just handing you stuff and they say do this,
Hmm.
then you don't have as much design creativity. But I would also argue there's so much creativity that goes into programming.
Oh,
And
sure.
that's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy. Like
Hmm.
I've built some weird things that have no practical use case at all,
Hmm.
just to do some weird stuff and just to try some stuff out and use that creativity of just like I have no idea how to do this, but I'm gonna hack around and get creative until I
Hmm.
can find something that gets close or works.
Yep. And I've also, this is just how my brain works, but I almost need that back and forth.
Hmm.
Right now, I'm been doing a ton of design work, just full time, and not a lot of dev, which
And
has
you're
been
like
great
I
because
need to write code.
right. Well, I favor design a little bit more than dev, but my brain was just mush at the end of the day, and
hmm
I was like, I need to do something far more logical that's very sequence oriented that I can just crank out. But I found that that balance really actually helps my creativity.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that goes back to people are not just one-sided. They have
Mhm.
other backgrounds, other skills, and again, being able to tie those into something makes a lot of sense. By the way,
Sure.
Steven, shout out to Steven Creates, gave a tier one sub, which is a pretty big deal in the Twitch
Oh,
land.
awesome.
So he gifted that to Zach. So Steven, thank you for that, and Zach, enjoy the tier one sub. That's one of the things that I need to think about for Twitch engagement is people that are subscribers can do some extra things, and I haven't defined what those things are. So that's something I need to start kind of looking into, how to reward people that are
Mm,
subscribers.
awesome.
Swarlow is dropping off. Little boy is pulling on his neck. Swarlow, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah.
Hopefully you enjoyed it. I've seen really positive comments, by the way, just
Sweet.
constantly throughout the theme or
Awesome.
throughout the stream.
Yeah.
So it seems like people are really enjoying the conversation and your perspective and background and stuff.
I think
Um,
there was a question about tools. I don't think I totally answered that.
yeah,
I just talked about inspiration and that
yeah.
kind of thing. But I do most of my design work in Figma. I also have a lot of a lot of experience with Adobe. I still think that Figma does not negate Photoshop and Illustrator. I still have those open all day. And then I have done Sketch, but I did migrate over to Figma. And then I
Hmm.
just have like a handful of like menu bar tools that I use. Contrast is a great one. It's sorry, this in the Apple store. I don't know what would be the PC equivalent,
Yeah.
but it's great for checking accessibility. So
Nice.
one of the projects I'm working on right now, there's a lot of concern around accessibility and making sure that the contrast is right. So it's great for just being able to check background and foreground
Hmm.
colors. Um, and then there's another one that I have called um, let's see, the company is called Pixel Snap, and they have some great tools, but this one's just for finding dimensions. And I'll use
Mm,
that a lot of
okay.
times just to figure out how the sizes or the spaces between items. And then SIP is another one, and that's a color picker tool. And so I'll just, the other cool part about that tool is that you can save a color palette. So, like my Self Teach Me
Nice.
color palette, I have saved in there. So I'm not having to constantly go look up those colors. Can just click on that, click on the color I want, and paste that text code.
Wow. So
Another
where
one.
I'm looking up SIP now, which is pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Is it a so you
I
can
think
try
it's
it
like
for free?
$5.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And so it's
Yep.
an app that you actually download on your Mac, and then you can use it to grab colors out of like websites and stuff.
Right. Anything. Yep.
Cool. Okay.
Anything.
I am buying this
Right
today.
now.
I have a color picker app in Chrome, like a Chrome extension, but
Hmm.
it doesn't
Yep.
work that great, and it's felt kind of
Hmm.
limited. So if you can testify to this one, that
Yeah.
I am
I
getting
love it.
it.
I do love it. There's another one that I experimented with. I think it's called Color Snapper, maybe. Yeah. Was one that I experimented, but I kind of like SIP better.
Okay, is Color Snapper a dedicated like Mac app too? Looks like
Yes,
it.
I
Yeah.
think so. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
I love productivity tools. I'm a geek about
Do you
it.
have any particular ones, other like not
um,
design wise, but just productivity stuff in general you want to share?
yeah, sure. So I'm a huge fan of Notion. That's a big deal for me. Um, and then just again, just like these dumb little menu bar things. Uh, Clean Snap is really good. That's also made, I think, by the same company, Pixel Snap. And it does screenshots, which again, sorry, it's just a Mac app, but it sounds dumb. Like, why would I need a screenshot app when like your Mac has that
Mm-hmm.
tool built in? But this like does everything and more. The nice thing is you can like recapture the same area later, which is nice. Like if I'm trying to grab a certain screenshot in different states, I'm not having to like go in and make sure that it's the same size and
Mm,
dimensions. I'm not having
okay.
to do that in Photoshop. It also does scrolling capture, which is great when you're trying to like capture an entire website.
Will it
You
scroll
just
it for you,
highlight. No,
or
you
you have to
scroll
scroll?
it.
Okay,
You
gotcha.
scroll it, but it does it, which is good if I'm trying to collect inspiration and things like that we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
earlier. I'll collect a lot of that and save it in Notion. It also has a self timer, which is great because sometimes if you're trying to take a screenshot of a menu or a certain state you're trying to get your mouse, it doesn't quite work, but you can set the self timer and it'll count down before it does a screenshot. And
Sweet.
then you can also do record the screen, so you can do it'll
Okay.
turn into a GIF or an MP4. which is great if you're trying to send it to somebody.
Yeah.
And then it takes these screenshots and it'll put it, I mean, I'm sure you can limit it if you don't want to share all your screenshots, but it will put them online. So you could share a
Share a
URL with
URL.
somebody if you wanted to.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Wes Boss for a while liked Cloud App. I think for a similar reason,
Yep.
we're able to take screenshots.
Mm-hmm.
So what is oh wow, there's a lot of stuff going on in chat. Let me so one thing, Builder Argus earlier in the chat said, I forgot to call this out, said, hey, it's Amy, I know her. Do you
Oh,
know
that's
who
funny.
Builder Argus is? Do you know who the
I-
Unfortunately, all right, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, usernames don't necessarily line up with
this
who we
is
know in
terrible.
other platforms. So I do the same thing. So I feel bad.
Like I feel awful.
Yeah, Builder, if you can share the connection, that would be great. But Builder just gave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 gifted tier 1 subs. So the one that we
Oh,
just talked about a
awesome.
second,
Yeah.
he gave 7 out to people in chat. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that, and hopefully other people will as well. It's Jason, he says.
Oh, I got you. I thought he was under doctor, not builder.
Okay.
So I didn't. I work with him.
Good deal. Well, welcome, Jason. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks
Jason.
for the subs. I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Actually, can I do a shout out since we were talking about work?
Absolutely.
We are hiring.
Oh, there you
So
go. Yeah.
If people are looking for a job, either design or development, we are hiring. It's a fantastic company.
Yeah.
Zeal. So you can go to codingzeal.com.
That's what I was gonna ask. Okay. So
yeah. Jason asked me earlier to mention
Yeah.
we're hiring.
Jason, if you have a link handy, do you mind just throwing that in the chat? If you have one like directly to like a hiring page? If you have that, throw it in the chat.
I can get it really quick.
Either way. Oh, he's got it. Yep. Codingzeal.com/hiring.
Awesome.
That's easy enough.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yep. And it's a fantastic company. And actually, this is a small soapbox that I have.
There we go.
I can grow a little bit. But I just feel like a lot of times in the dev and design space that freelance is like the pipe dream, that everybody's like, oh, I want to work for myself and do my own thing, which it is great. I did it for 7 years, but I also don't want people to minimize there is a ton of stability and freedom in having a job. And so I actually left freelance full-time for this job at Zeal. And it has been one of the best experiences, not only because it's a fantastic company, but just for our family. Gave us a lot more stability and being able to turn it off at 5 o'clock or truly go on vacation, or just obviously the health benefits and the steady paycheck. But just for people that feel like they're stuck in a 9 to 5, don't feel stuck. It's also a gift.
There are lots of things that come along with that. The people are killing me in the chat. Just got to subscribe from Corey. Corey, thank you for the subscribe. Awesome. I appreciate that. If my sound effects were working, I'd be given like all the sound effects. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because I do think some people have the perception of like, oh, doing freelance would be the dream and that's kind of it. But there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lack of stability. There's kind of making sure for you and for your family that you have work coming in. There's like having to pay for healthcare. There's doing your own taxes and like all sorts of stuff. So it definitely could be amazing. It definitely could be amazing for a while, but not forever. And then it may not be amazing. And I do think there have been decent amount of conversations for people talking about like, hey, you should go out there and do it on your own. And sometimes they kind of overlook the fact that like, yeah, but there's also stability, there's health insurance, there's all these things. And I would add to what you said of, if you feel stuck, the solution could be freelancing. It may not be, but also the solution is you can go and find a different full-time job, right? Like you could go and find a full-time job with a different company, a different culture, something you're more specifically interested in, and still help solve that problem by still having the stability.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, Builder Argus is saying, which is Jason, saying he is part of the Live Coders team. Live Coders is a team of coders on Twitch. I am not, I say not that active. I'm almost not active at all in Live Coders. Unfortunately, I wish I was more connected, but I'm not. So anyway, Jason, nice to meet you and have you here. And I hopefully we'll see you around in more of that stuff, and then maybe get a little bit more engaged with the other Live Coders. Steven Creates, who's been pretty active in the chat, is saying that you need to come back on again. And here's my selfish shout out. One, I get to do this stuff on All Zero Time, just being being genuine, hanging out with developers, designers, people in the community. So shout out to Aussiero for that. Shout out to the Aussiero Twitch channel. And let me give you a link for that. And now we get into maybe a little teaser. We might have some collaboration work to do
Yes.
on,
Yes, I hope so.
yeah, on some authentication with Keystone JS. Is
That's
that
right.
right?
Yep.
So look forward to that. I think we'll do that on the Aussiero channel. Don't know when, so you might as well just follow now so you get notified when we do it in the future. And it's also other really great content. But tell me a little bit about Keystone. I've heard of Keystone and I really almost know nothing. So I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So it's an Australian company. Not that that makes any difference, but
Ooh,
it is
Australia. No,
kind
I'm
of
just kidding.
cool. It is cool. Actually, you know what? I am part of their Slack channel,
Oh, cool.
and their response, I've had a few questions. Their response has been amazing.
Isn't
I
that great?
just, yeah. I mean, even though I'm like, you're on the other side of the world, I really don't anticipate you answering my question for 12 hours.
Hmm.
They've been on top of it. So just a huge shout out to them in terms of their support team. But Keystone JS is a framework. It deals with React, but it has a lot of the backend pieces that you would have to set up if you're doing a GraphQL server or API. So, for example, you're having to write reducers, you're having to write all these different mutations, all these queries and things like that. And Keystone has a majority of that stuff built in for the backend. So all you do is you go in and you outline the shape of your data, how you want that returned, and then it will handle all that stuff for you, which is pretty amazing. You don't feel like you're writing the same thing over and over again. And it has a admin UI. So right out of the box, if you want to go in and just click around and add data, you can. But I've just found the documentation to be fantastic, and just the entire user experience. So even with that, you have to basically pick your front end. So the project that I've been working on, I've had Next.js running on the front end, and it integrates beautifully with Keystone.
So lots of questions. I love
Yes.
I love tools and frameworks. Like as much as it's annoying that there's so many to choose from, I love hearing about them. I may not ever
Yeah.
use them, although we will do this collaboration.
Yes.
But you hear about a lot and you can only like play around with so many. But I love hearing about them. So a couple of things. This will basically like kind of build out your GraphQL API for you is one
That's
of the
right.
big benefits. Okay.
That's right.
What sort of database does it work with in the behind the scenes, or is it any of them?
Yeah, I think you can use Postgres. I have MongoDB running on my project.
Okay, cool.
And that process to set up was seamless. It
Sweet.
was like crazy how easy it was.
I love that.
Mhm.
That's the thing that gets me so excited about tools is like I just don't want to do I don't want to do the boring stuff, right? Like I don't want to
Yes.
do like setting up the app. I want to build the app. And there's so
Yes.
many services and frameworks and things like that that help you do that. That's super cool.
Yep. And it has
Go ahead.
users built into it, and
Okay.
it has some authentication. That's the part that I'm
Mm-hmm.
still where we would collaborate on, but it has some user generation stuff set up. And the crazy part is there's also hooks. So for example, if someone wants to reset their password, you have a hook built in that basically
To do
you just
password
write the
reset.
function. Yeah, and it'll send the email. You have complete control over that
Cool.
whole process. I was surprised how easy it was.
I like that. Very cool.
Mhm.
That is another thing. I mean, part of the reason why I work at a company like Auth0, it's just one of those things that you don't need to write every time, and you shouldn't, right? Like
Mhm.
it's all basically the same, like doing a password reset or
Right.
email verification. And then you can get into some of the deeper features too, but it's just not something that needs to be rewritten with
Mhm.
every application. So my next question, you mentioned Next.js. So I'm wondering what that integration looks like because Next.js has like a backend component to it with its serverless functions. So does Keystone have like a full actual server node server backend, or would it tie in through like serverless functions in Next.js?
It ties in through, I think, serverless functions. Basically, you create a file where you set up your connection to your server, and then it'll um, allow you to basically pick all those GraphQL
Okay.
statements out.
Cool.
I don't feel like I'm doing a great job of explaining, but basically there's one file that handles that connection. So
Sweet.
once that's in place, the two are talking. And that's only because I have in my particular project, the front end and the back end split up. I think in their examples repo, they even have like those two living together if you wanted to. Like there's a Next.js integration stuff that they even have built in. That's only because I
Okay.
have them completely separate.
So are you using Next.js? Are you doing anything on the server with Next.js? As in,
Oh,
yeah, it's this.
the back end side.
Yeah, it's kind of a
No,
weird. So
uh,
this gets like really complicated. So Next.js is just serving pages, just serving static pages.
um, in this case, no, they would be dynamic because you can set that get initial props, right?
Okay.
So
So
that
you
it's
okay.
not.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yep.
And the conversation about front end versus back end
I know,
gets
right?
so much more complicated now with tools like Next.js.
hmm
Anyway, yeah, that's really cool. I am looking forward to seeing what you have, and then maybe
Yeah,
where I can help out a little bit. I think the thing you mentioned was doing JWTs, JSON Web
that's
Tokens, for
right.
people
That's right.
who have never used those or aren't familiar with those. This will be fun. I'm excited about this. So, moral of the
Sweet.
story: go ahead and follow the Auth0 Twitch channel.
Yes.
While you're doing that, go ahead and follow the Auth0 YouTube channel. Go ahead and sign up for Auth0 for. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah.
all the things, I think.
And that
Yeah.
particular project has Tailwind on it. I don't know if you want to talk about that at
Right.
all.
Yes.
Do you have opinions about Tailwind?
I like Tailwind a lot. I had started to. I've done kind of variations in the past of what Tailwind is on my own. So Bootstrap for a
hmm
while still does, has a lot of utility classes. That's not what it's mainly used for, but it has a lot of utility classes, and I think it's added a
Right.
lot more in Bootstrap 5. And then I noticed when I started just building smaller projects, like instead of I was just doing those same sort of utilities, margin left two and that kind of stuff, not anywhere near the scale that like Tailwind is. Anyway, so I had kind of started down that path, and then I heard people talk about and rave about Tailwind for months before I gave it a shot, and then I really enjoyed it. And actually, one of the questions that we had several minutes ago about like what are the best resources for designers, beginnertailwind.com is created by Chris Sev, Chris underscore Sev, Chris underscore Sev on Twitter. He's changed his handle recently. And not only was it a good Tailwind intro, but I loved it because it was a great intro to design. Like being able to relate what Tailwind can do for you back to design rules and
hmm
skills
Yep.
and ideals was really powerful for me. So I'm definitely a fan. Is that
Yeah.
Tailwind obviously used in this project? Is that something that you have been enjoying working with?
Yeah, I just recently started coding with it because if you go, I don't know how familiar your audience is with Tailwind. If we should, I can explain it a
Yeah.
little bit. But basically, if you're, say, traditional CSS, if I wanted to create a hero, I would give it in my HTML a class of hero and then go to my style sheet and write all those styles out. So I'd say padding left, 10 pixels, padding right, 10 pixels, whatever. Well, with Tailwind, it has all these, they're called utility classes. So they have a class called, say, this is not it. Well, it'd be like P1, P2,
Hmm.
P3. And so that'll control padding around the entire area. And you put that class directly into your HTML. So your HTML looks
Hmm.
a little crazy because you have all the
A
like
lot
10
of utility.
classes
Yeah.
lined up. Yeah. And so Adam, the creator, even talks about this a little bit that when you first see Tailwind, you kind of want to throw up in your mouth a little bit because it goes against that whole idea of separation of concerns and how you would normally think about it. But and I actually agree. I avoided Tailwind for a long time because of that. But as I've used it on a project, I'm like, shoot, I really do like Tailwind, especially like on React projects where everything is so component driven, anyways. It just seems to make sense. But the biggest benefit that I've enjoyed, especially as a designer, is that the designer on that team has already made a lot of decisions. So, for example, everything
Hmm.
is based on, say, a quarter rim scale. And so, when you're talking about typography, stuff just lines up a little bit better. And it's actually using Tailwind has made me a better designer because when I'm designing something, I'm making sure that I'm using a similar scale system than just these magic arbitrary
Hmm.
numbers. Oh, there we go.
Uh,
The lights.
yeah, and I wish you could hear the sound effect because I'm really giddy. It's like a great light switch sound effect. I think it's so cool. But um, yeah, that was my takeaway from beginnertailwind.com. Let me grab that link for people. Although it's
Yeah, and I
uh,
would just say for people that are starting out, I was a little frustrated at the beginning just because I was like, I know how to write CSS. Why am I
mhm,
having to like abstract that knowledge and create this whole other like shorthand language for writing something that I already know? But now that I know it, I can like step out a website a whole lot faster with it because it's like P10 for padding 10 instead
oh,
of having to write out padding 10. So that's made a difference. The other piece that I really like about it, well, hold on. While I'm talking about getting started, I just had the documentation open the whole time I was coding
mhm.
and would just constantly be looking. And then the more you use it,
The
you
less you
remember
have to
it.
look.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. But the other piece that's really nice about it is if you ever want to say rip out something, you rip out the CSS with you. So you don't have these stale CSS classes in your CSS that you're not using.
Hmm.
It comes with it. And in case for those people that are like, oh goodness, that would be a huge library of code or a huge CSS file, you can run purge CSS as part of your build script and it will take out all the classes within Tailwind that you don't need. So,
It's really a pretty in some ways it's simple, but also in a lot of ways it's revolutionary, and
mm-hmm,
that's why so many people look at it to start and they freak out, right? They have that
right.
reaction, and that's also why a lot of people have given it a shot, not expecting to like
Mm-hmm.
it, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I like
Yeah.
this," and
Yeah.
that's the cool world we live in from a tools, frameworks, classes, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like the world that we live in gives us so many options and we're able to iterate on so many
Mm-hmm.
different things. It can be overwhelming, right? Like figuring
Yeah.
out what to choose and what to do, but having those options means you like as you become comfortable and branch out, now you can start to pick and choose like what things actually make sense for you and what works, what clicks,
Mm-hmm.
and ignore the things that don't, and that's totally fine.
Yep. 100%.
It's a fun world to live in. So my question for the chat, Tailwind, yay or nay? I think there's probably a decent amount of Tailwind supporters in here. So let me know in the chat if you use Tailwind and or do you enjoy Tailwind? Let us know in the
There
chat.
was a viral article this week about why I don't use Tailwind. So it was an interesting read on the other side of it.
Okay. Do you remember any of
So,
the points for that?
oh goodness, let me see if I can
Yeah.
actually find the
Put you
link
on the
and you
spot
can put
again.
it in, you can put it in chat.
Okay.
Um, let me see.
Got a couple of comments coming in, by the way. Ninzor, what's up? I don't know if I've seen you in the chat so far. Welcome, thanks for being here. Says yes. Travis Codes says I really like it. Brad Garapi says great for bootstrapping. Brad says he wouldn't pick it for a long-term project. Then another yeah. I've tried and tried. I'm still an emotion person. So that emotion is like styled components type thing,
Okay.
I
Yep. I
think.
do love style
Okay.
components.
I think Travis Codes read this article as well and said there's lots
I
of good
stuck it in
points in there.
the Zoom chat,
Okay,
not the, okay.
yeah. Let me
Yep.
grab that and I will
It
put it in
is
there as well.
interesting.
And Brad Garapi is qualifying his statement to rephrase: if the size or timeline of the project is small, I would choose it.
Mm.
If the size is bigger and or longer, I'm thinking he's saying he would not choose it.
Interesting. I think another piece of it is if you're collaborating with another developer, it gives you a common language. That's the other
Hmm.
side of it. You're not, does this class exist? Does it not? I'll just go ahead and write my own. And then you
Yeah,
have
right.
multiple things that end up
Hmm.
doing the same stuff.
And to your point about it just reinforcing some design is really nice.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
and hearing again, I go back to this beginner tailwind. Everybody should check it out. Hearing Chris explain how these classes relate back to design and how they fit you into this design box that you may not have fit into,
Hmm.
and not in a limiting way, either for the most part. But hearing him make those parallels was really like I look at that Tailwind course and think it's one of the best design courses I've ever taken
Mm.
because of being able to draw those parallels was really, really interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, that is good. And you can configure it too. That's the other piece that I really
Hmm.
like about it. With Bootstrap, you can sometimes tell, okay, this is a Bootstrap project, or I end up going in and rewriting a lot of the stuff that Bootstrap built in.
Hmm.
With Tailwind, you can configure all of that stuff.
Yep. Yep. And that's why I kind of qualified, like it puts you in this box, but then also it lets you get out of the box if you want, or
Mm-hmm.
change the box if
Yep.
you want to.
Yep. Yep.
We just had chat is going wild today. We just had another set of tier 1 subs come in from Trevory Arish.
Yeah.
Trevor
Trevor.
Yarish. Do you know Trevor?
Yeah. I do. I work with him too.
Oh, cool. Well, Trevor, thank you. Thank you for being here and supporting. Thanks for the subs. I really appreciate that. Man, we need to bring your friends and coworkers on more often. This is
Yeah.
great.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's see. Corey says personal issues. I still don't know it by heart. I agree with that. Until you spend enough time to get comfortable with the classes, it's a little bit of a hassle to go to the docs each time. So I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
Yep.
But you get comfortable fairly quickly, I think. At least
Mm-hmm.
that was my perspective.
Yep.
And so to his point, he can do style components or motion 100 times faster. And that's the beauty
Yeah.
of this, right? Like we could really like Tailwind, other people could really like it, and it may just not be your fit, but there's so many options that
Yeah.
you still have your thing in style components and or emotion, and that works great. And like, if anybody tells you you're not supposed to do that or you shouldn't, don't listen to them, right? Like do what works
Yes.
best for you is what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Well, and your end user is not going to know.
Truth. Yes.
They're not going to know. Oh
Absolutely.
man, that's a Tailwind site.
Again. Yeah, that they're gonna look at, does it look the way I expect it to? Does it act the way I expect it to? And that's really it.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor says this has been a great conversation so far. Thank you both. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This has
Thank
been a
you.
lot of fun and so many positive comments in the chat. This has been great. Let's see, Xander. The biggest thing that I've heard is just that it's so independent of your JavaScript. Is that, I wonder, I guess he's talking about Tailwind being independent of JavaScript.
Oh, probably. They do have some of the config stuff is in JSON because you have a tailwind.config.js file, but you're not like writing JavaScript functions and things like that.
Yeah.
It's just the formatting.
Yep. And that
Yep.
maybe some of the separation he's talking about is thinking about the styled components area where it's more JavaScripty than just CSS classes.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't quite realize we did this, but we did, like, I'm trying to do the two different segments as we kind of wrap up. One is the soapbox, and you talked about the soapbox, and I didn't even think to say like, hey, hold on, we should hold this.
Oh, sorry.
But no, it's totally fine. But going back to just really quickly, your soapbox, something you're passionate about is freelance doesn't necessarily mean freedom, is what you have in the notes.
Yep.
And like freelance may not be for everyone, and there's other paths. If you take 1 or 2 minutes just to do like a recap of your soapbox on freelance, why you did it, why you changed from it, and then what your general thoughts are.
Yeah. So I did freelance full time for 7 years, and during that time it was actually pretty good because I had small kids. They were newborns and allowed me to work from home and help take care of them. But I ended up working all the time because if I wasn't working, I wasn't getting paid. And it just started to create issues within our family, not from my husband. He's been 100% supportive. But just when my kids have gotten older and they've looked and said, Mom, why are you working all the time? And that's not a question you want to hear from your 3-year-old. You just realize that's not how I want you to remember me when you're older. And that's not how I want you to think of your childhood. And so right now I'm working for a company called Zeal. So I think there's a link in the
Shout out to
chat.
Zeal.
Yeah, coding Zeal, and from some of my coworkers. But I had done freelance work or contract work for them for I think 4 years before I went on board full time with them. And the crazy part was they were like, we've dated for 4 years, basically. Like,
we feel
just
pretty
go
good
ahead
about
and make
this.
it official. Yeah. But I mean, that was nice. I did know what I was getting. And the fact that they were probably the best and most consistent client that I had during those 4 years. And so, for me and for our family, becoming a full-time designer and developer there has meant more freedom for us. And I say that because I feel like a lot of designers and developers feel like freelance is the pipe dream. I can work for myself. I can define my own hours, all these things. But a lot of times you even end up doing tasks that you're not particularly crazy about, whether it's writing contracts or bookkeeping or sales and marketing. And you're like, all I really want to do is just do design and dev. And you have all these other things that you have to take into account when you're doing freelance. So for us, we found more stability with the full-time job. And it's been a really good thing. And of course, it also makes a difference when you're working for the right company. So
True.
Zeal is a good company and they are hiring.
Yes. If you have, if somebody wants to throw that hiring link back in the chat, feel free. And I love the awareness of hearing feedback, right, from
Mhm.
your kids, and saying like that's not what I want this to be, and then making that change. So again, doesn't mean that freelance isn't for some people. It doesn't mean that it wasn't good for a while, right? But
Right.
there was a
Right.
different, or a change that you wanted to make for specific reasons, and anything that goes back to improving work life balance and family time for me, is that's something
Yep.
I'm pretty outspoken about myself, and pretty adamant about. So I
Mhm.
love to hear other people kind of making changes in the things that they do to make sure that they're supporting their family and their time with them. So that's great.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mansav put in the chat a link to designcode.io. And I've never seen this before.
Mhm.
Looks like it's courses and tutorials for $19 a month. The site looks really nice.
Yeah.
So it seems
They
like they
have
would
a
be. Oh,
They have some
have
good
you heard of
resources
them?
on Framer. Yeah, they have
Okay.
some great resources on Framer. And I've been like in Framer land for the past 3 weeks. And I don't know if you have any Framer users out there, but it is a fantastic tool. It's probably the best tool that I've seen in terms of blending design and development.
Hmm.
The reason being you can create design components. Just as you would say in Figma, you can even import your Figma files, but you can also write React components and use those within your prototype. So
Oh,
there's a
cool.
project that I'm working on right now where we're trying to convert some of these components into React components within the prototype. So when I hand it off to the developer, they already have most of the front end work already done. So just trying to speed up
Nice.
that timeline a little
Yeah,
bit faster.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had success with some of their content. The website looks great, so I say it's definitely worth a look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Corey is saying he's trying to grow himself as a content creator and educator, but love the idea of having a stable job. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
Zach is asking about the tool. So the tool is Framer, is what
Hmm.
FA. Yeah, got a link in the chat. Thank you, people in the chat, for
Perfect.
adding links and stuff. That's really helpful.
Yeah. And they
Um,
have a motion library if you're just interested in using the animation component, and you don't have to use that. Like you can use it separate of the prototyping tool. It's a
okay.
really good animation
hmm
library.
I
Yep.
have heard lots of that. I think Scott Talinsky did a video on, or a series on Framer
That's right.
motion, and I don't know, 6 months or something. I don't know how long it's been.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe last question, and then we'll wrap up. So Taylor Johnson is asking about maybe there's a difference as a developer from having different experiences at an agency versus working on a specific product. Agency, the general idea is you kind of work on the project at
Mhm.
hand, right? And that changes, or maybe you have multiple at a time. Versus if you work on a specific product, you might end up working on that product basically kind of full time for a year or two, or like a long time. So it
Mhm.
could be a different experience. Builder Jason offered to have a conversation about that with Taylor, and says that he does the hiring of devs at Zeal. So I'll let them have that conversation to themselves. But any perspective on like the difference as a developer working at an agency versus on a specific product, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So some of it just depends on I guess what you're interested in. So when I worked for, I mentioned an agency early in my career and then doing freelance. Obviously, I was creating lots of websites and that kind of thing. And it's fun because it's new and fresh. But when you stay on a project long term, there's a whole nother set of problems that comes up. You're trying to constantly improve and iterate, and you'll have, like, say, business people come in and make different requests, or we'll get different feedback from users. So at least the way that Zeal does it is, even though we have multiple clients, a lot of times you're working on a particular project more, I say, long term. It just really depends on the contract.
Mm-hmm.
So you do get kind of a feel for both. If you get stuck, there's the opportunity to change projects, potentially. But it's kind of interesting. I probably would have thought, I don't know, earlier on, that I needed the variety. And I do like the variety. I like having multiple challenges in front of me, but I wouldn't say that like working on a particular project long term is like void of those challenges. It just presents itself in a different way, and you have different a different set of knowledge and insight into that project and its history, which is very interesting.
And Jason is, I think, kind of affirming, adding some affirmation to what you said about it depends on what you like. And yeah, I think that's kind of just a general thing. Again, that people don't know that they can find specific variations of jobs that make more sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of it depends on what you like. I think that's something that I would highly recommend people in general spend time just reflecting on, like, at your job now, what very specific parts do you enjoy? What very specific parts do you not enjoy? And if you're looking for your next job, ask about those things. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I specifically want to do more of this. I specifically want to work on more projects. I don't want to work on one project for a year at a time. Or I specifically want to work on one project because I don't want to bounce around too much. Like, those are the things that you can kind of pay attention for yourself, and then keep those in mind and ask questions about in a hiring process to say, like, this is what I'm looking for. And if it's not the right thing, then hopefully you have some, like, patience that you can take your time to really get the right thing. If you need to get a job, you need to get a job. But if you have
Mm-hmm.
the ability to take your time and be selective, then you absolutely should. And you should advocate for yourself, because if you go to a job that the majority of the time you're not doing the stuff that you're really excited about, you're kind of missing out. And hopefully people can kind of take that and use it for whatever that next role is, or their next career maybe, and take all that stuff into account and really do the things that they specifically enjoy doing most.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is all we've got. There was one potential last opportunity of community shout outs, and we've done a couple for hiring for Zeal. If you want to throw that back in the chat, I'm totally good with that. I will also throw in a couple of your links again in the chat. Any other community or people or person, anything else you'd like to shout out?
Yeah, if you guys would just subscribe to my YouTube channel, that's been a fun project the past year, just creating different pieces of content around web design development.
Love it. And that link is in the chat. By the way, there is
Perfect.
a developer YouTube Discord server. So if you are interested
Awesome.
in joining that,
Yes, I will
I
definitely
can get
jump
you
on
an invite.
that.
It's one of the best communities that I've joined. It's been a
Awesome.
real game changer for me in the YouTube space. So yes, we will talk about that, and we will talk about trying to get on for a stream on the
Authentication.
Osiro channel
Yep.
for authentication stuff. Yep.
Yep.
Um,
Sweet.
Glad we're able to continue to promote that. Oh, Corey, yes. One last question. Can I throw a Discord link in the chat? There is a Discord command, so at any point, if you want to find the invite, you can run the Discord command, and it will send you the link. And then Amy, I will send it to you directly, so you don't have to. If you don't get it in the chat, I will make sure you get it. Is what I'm saying. Also, sorry. One last question. There's no chance that you're hiring for a community manager type role, are you? My wife is looking, and I'm kind of asking around.
Yeah. Not at this time, but
Okay.
I will definitely note your contact information
Yes.
in case that
If
does
it,
come up.
yeah, if it does, I would love to be able to share it with her.
Yeah.
There's my selfish question of the day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is it. I'm gonna send everyone over to. I usually go to Clarkio. Um, I'm gonna switch it up, and I'm gonna go. MongoDB is streaming right now, which may or may not be my friend Otto. I know they've got different people that go on there. So we'll go and see who is on the MongoDB channel in about 10 seconds. The chat has been amazing today, by the way. Thanks everyone for being in the chat.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for adding links. Amy, thanks for coming on and accepting my
Thank you for
random
having me.
request. Yeah, it's a great way to make friends, and I'm looking forward to talking more and hopefully doing a stream in the future.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll see everyone later. And we